Welcome back to Somewhere on the Spectrum. We are already moving through this journey so quickly. I can't even hardly believe we are moving into talking about the adult years and everything that starts to happen outside of what public schooling can provide. I have to admit, being on the side of education, I think my mind stayed in that world. And originally, I really did think that this whole documentary would only be about elementary schooling for those on the spectrum. But I quickly learned that there's so much to all of this. You watching all know this, right? I'm the one coming in with the unknown thought process, but we protect our children in our schooling years. And then what happens moving forward? Because unfortunately, they can't stay with us forever, right? And so this week on our episode, we are going to be discussing just that. We have three amazing guests that will be joining us. One is Amelia Dunaway, who's been with us before during the secondary schools video, but now she's going to talk about her journey going from high school into college. She is actually a student at Texas A&M University. And if you know anything about that university, it's not easy to get into. She's doing a great job, but not only is she encountering the normal hurdles that anybody going from high school to college would encounter, but then she has to think about all of the other things on top of it due to her diagnosis. She really has been doing a great job. I've been following her journey quite a bit, and I'm really proud of her. And I think you will be as well when you hear how she's progressing and what she's learned about herself along the way. We'll also be talking to Jennifer Dantzler from Inspire ND, a nonprofit here in the Houston area that works with children starting at the age of 16 through that transition process and their families. And then what happens if they're not at a level that they can go off into college? What if they need more support? And so she'll be talking about her nonprofit and how to support with that, in addition to some very timely tips for families. And then we'll also be talking to Glenda Kroll, who I met randomly through some social media. I've been able to join her on her talk show, but also she is the sibling of two brothers on the spectrum. And she's been navigating now as their initial caretaker. However, during the years that they were going from schooling into adulthood, she had to be there to work with her parents and make sure that her siblings were still being taken care of. The stories this week are so profound. You're going to find them so helpful. And if nothing else, so eye-opening when we talk about so many different things that come with navigating the world of autism. Hey there, everyone. I am here with Jennifer Dantzler from Inspire NB. Jennifer, welcome to the show. I'm super excited for today's episode, as I mentioned in the introduction, and super excited to talk with Jennifer. I saw things in the world of autism from the perspective of elementary principal. I did not even know or think about all those separate layers that have to take place as children grow and mature and become adults and go into their adulthood years and so forth. And Jennifer, you were getting your start in education as well. and saw a need like this. So talk to us a little bit about how you got here today.
Sure. So about 21 years ago, I started my nonprofit here in the Houston area, originally called Including Kids. And it was to implement early intervention for children on the spectrum. Back when I think autism was like 1 in 500 were the rates. And there were less than 5 clinics in the entire Houston area that provided services, provided what we do, which is intensive individualized services. And then as our clients started to grow up, we originally served clients ages 2 through 10. Then our clients started turning 9, 10, 11, and we started discussing as a board, well, what are next steps for them? And we realized there were not good next steps for them that were still individualized, intensive, working on those meaningful life skills. So I went back to my board of directors, my bosses, you could say, and said, hey, what if we now increase the ages instead of 2 to 10 to 2 to 18? So we had a big, long, good, healthy discussion around that. And we did. We then increased the age. Then some of our clients started turning 17, 18, 19. And I went back to my board and said, well, what's next? What if we increase the age group of who we serve? And then what I realized was that now, with medical insurance coming into play for early intervention, there were even fewer services for adults. More providers started coming into the picture for early intervention, but there were still not a lot of providers providing services for adults. So then we decided as a board that we would, I guess, not be the jack of all trades and master of none, and really focus our efforts on serving adolescents, young adults, and really helping them try to figure out what's next in their life. So here we are today. As Inspire ND, we serve adolescents and young adults ages 16 and up, and through a variety of services. And we really, really are trying to help our clients, or the people we serve, and their families figure out what's next, because they do at age 22, they call it the cliff, because once school services stop, these families are left out there and have to figure it out for themselves.
You know, I think this is such a needed service, clearly, and it is something that we never think about. And I'm just so grateful that you all are here able to do this. And I'm sure that the families are as well, because you service families that might be a little different from families we've already been talking to during this journey. Our families have been maybe more, they, knew something was going on, but it's more the higher end of the spectrum. And I know you service people that are maybe have a little more needs, but also be able to have that connection within this local school district, kind of help with those transitions. I said after the elementary episode, going into secondary years from last week, just saying how a lot of times families would say to me, please keep our children in elementary because you protect them, you have that structure. And change is scary for the families, even though we know change is even more scary for the diagnosed, right? However, we can't just protect and do all this, but this is a way to kind of transition. So talk to us a little bit about what a typical transition period might look like, if there is a typical.
Right. And yes, with autism being a huge spectrum, I wouldn't say that there is a typical, but it really depends on the goals of the client themselves, the goal of the family, where they see themselves. As you said, we work with clients everywhere who are trying to get into college and navigate college life, all the way to those who might have some pretty significant inappropriate behaviors that affect them from even just maybe being safe in the grocery store. So part of what we try to do is create various services based on those child's needs. And so what a lot of people, I think, don't understand, which is I would say sort of my soapbox, is I don't care how old you are, you can still make progress and you can still gain skills that you need for life. So even if you have a child who is now 22 and we didn't really work on things like how much things cost and when you go to the grocery store, we can still work on that. I can't tell you how many clients we've worked with that were in their late teens, early 20s, And, you know, within 6 months, had some very valuable skills they needed for life. So it's also never too late. Like, I don't want families to think, I didn't realize how important things like pure, true independent toileting was, right? So I have a lot of difficult conversations with families because they'll say, oh, my child's independent in the bathroom. I say, oh, and then I get them to talk about what that means. And they'll say, oh, well, all I have to do is stand there in the bathroom and talk them through, but then they do it themselves. And I say, great, but then that means forever in their lives, they're gonna have an
Right.
adult who might not be you or one of your loved ones standing there in the bathroom, having to guide your child through the bathroom skills. I'd much rather than be fully independent in the bathroom to where we can say no one else ever goes in the bathroom with that child, right? To help protect that child's rights, dignity, all of those things. So it really, so as far as the transition goes, like one of the services we offer is called futures planning meetings. Public schools offer those too. And it is so important for our families as your child turns 10, 12, 14, you have to start thinking about when they're 16, 18, 22, because time will march on, whether you want it to or not, and your child will be 22 and they will go through that graduation ceremony. And then what? And so we really have to look at those transitional services, but they really need to be individualized based on the goals of that child and that family.
So one thing I was thinking about when we had our preliminary conversations about everything and thinking about all of these transitions and parents and families out there, even school personnel out there. Being in elementary, we didn't know what would come after secondary. I don't know. I know you're working closely with this district in particular, and I'm sure not every community, maybe bigger cities probably have services similar to yours, but chances are maybe no.
Right.
Where would families find those kind of resources?
Well, it depends on where you're watching from, what state, what city, what town, right?
And this is even international, so it could be.
Or what
anywhere,
country for
right,
that
yeah.
matter, right? There are certain states around the country that provide better funding for once a child turns 18, and there are more services available. So what you might call day programs, all the way up to vocational training and vocational employment, all the way to colleges that have really good support systems for people with neurodiversity. We're here in Texas. In Texas, once you turn 18, you become eligible for the Medicaid waiver program. So regardless of the parent's income, if they did their finances correctly and did things like set up trusts and not have a lot of money in the child's name, they'd be accessible for Medicaid waiver services, which is different than Medicaid. The challenge is there's a 16-year wait list for those services.
I remember us talking about that, and I'm glad you brought that up because I don't know if families don't really understand that.
Well, and what's really hard is you walk through with now a parent of a child of a 2 or 3 or 4-year-old now just getting diagnosed. That's a lot to process in itself. And then to say, by the way, you need to get on this wait list for when they're 18, right? And so that's a lot. The challenge is for our families at 2, 3, and 4, they're like, well, my goal is to not need those services at 18. And I say, great, get on the wait list. Then at 18, when they call you and say you're eligible for services, you say, I don't need them. We drop the mic literally, we have a dance party, and we don't need them.
Because they're not obligated.
They're not obligated whatsoever. Now, once you get on the wait list, though, you do have to call every year and verify and tell them you still want to be on the wait list, or they drop you from the wait list. So you have to set an alarm in your phone, because if you move, they don't find you, and you just need to say, yes, I still want to be on the wait list. But we could do probably 10 episodes on this alone. But the point is, depending on the state you're in, a lot of the states do have these Medicaid waiver services for when they turn 18. But that's different than Medicaid itself, and it's based on the child's income at 18. So most children at 18, because of their disability and because they, probably didn't work a lot in high school, would be eligible for these services, and a lot of parents don't realize that. So we do a lot of supports around trying to educate our families on special needs trust, guardianship, whole other episode in itself. It's a complicated topic.
Absolutely.
guardianship.
And here's the thing, there are a lot of avenues that people could go on, but then not knowing that they are even out there, educating yourself on that. So where would you tell people to start? Social workers, school districts? Do you start with just going to your state websites?
Yes, yes, and yes. Again, it really does depend on the state. For instance, here in Texas, in the Houston area, there's something called FEAT, which is Families for Effective Autism Treatment. They do have them in several major cities around the country where they're parent run, but they're going to be the ones who know locally about their districts, their services, their adult services. There's also basically what you would do is Google Medicaid waiver California, right? Whatever state you're in, and then it should start to take you to websites, which are not necessarily easy to manage, but you have to, right? As I say all the time in this field, ignorance is not bliss. And unfortunately, as a parent, you're going to have to be your child's advocate, whether you have that 18-year-old who's trying to go to college, or that child who's more challenged, who needs you literally to be their voice. Or if you are the person with neurodiversity, there are so many supports out there that you can access. Yes, it is difficult, it is challenging, but we need to try to do it, right? There are sometimes private advocates who, unfortunately you have to pay, but they would help you navigate that. There are advocates I know locally here that will help parents navigate the Medicaid waiver system. So but the best place obviously nowadays is the internet. School districts also should, that little blue pamphlet, or what, depending what color you are in whatever state you are, that little packet that you have to sign that you say you got every year and that you read, I really would read it, right? Once I would literally read it once, at least once, cover to cover, because in there should be the local resources, your local, what ours is called DADS, which is Department of Aging and Disability Services. Again, each state has it called something a little different, but read that packet from your ARD, because it should have those services. If not, if you are in a school district, you need to contact the counselor, the person who's running your annual IEP meeting, we call them ARDs in Texas, and say, help, I need to plan for when they're 22. Who do I talk to? What do I do? Because again, things like guardianship are tricky, because you can have full, partial, or no guardianship of your child once they turn 18. And so for a lot of our families where the child is much more affected and the parents don't realize they should establish guardianship, if the child has to go to the hospital and they say no, 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 because they do not want a needle in their arm, they're their own guardian. They can decline services.
Wow.
So depending on
we could
the
have
needs,
several episodes, huh?
yes. So depending on the needs and the abilities of the person who's neurodiverse would depend on, again, what people don't realize is there's full, partial, and then no guardianship. So there are plenty of people with neurodiversity that should be their own guardians, but then there are plenty of people with neurodiversity that shouldn't be their own guardians.
Right. And then those in the middle that you're just not sure about.
Right.
So again, navigating the entire spectrum.
Yes.
So let's talk about Inspire a little bit more. We're sitting in this beautiful little room here. And behind us, we have lots of neat little decorations and things, and I see price tags.
Yes.
So tell me about this space right here.
So one of the services that we offer is what's called the Inspire Store. And you can go online and purchase our items through inspirestorend.org. And what this is a vocational training site. So for a lot of our adolescents and young adults, they've never had a job or even a volunteer experience where they've had to learn how to navigate having a boss, time management, staying on task, all of those things. And so we started this as a vocational training site to where everything you see is made by our young adults and then are sold. And then 100% of those proceeds go back into buying more materials for them to practice making more items. We then go out and sell them in the community, so that also they're not only working on craft work, but now they're also working on going in the community, having to navigate conversations, money handling, set up and take down, inventory, all of those things. So for some, this a little bit more protected environment might be the kind of long-term employment. And for some, it's just the jump start they need to say, okay, now I've learned these skills. I'm ready to go out into the community and get a job out in the community. So the Inspire store is one aspect of our services. We do have full-time and part-time day programming where we do work on, again, those life skills, everything from laundry, cooking, social skills, navigating the internet safely, really anything under the sun, you can name it. Then we have an adult seminar where you might work on things like, hey, if you were going to go rent an apartment, what are all the fees that might be included, like a pet fee? What would you do if your faucet wouldn't turn off? Right? Who do you call? What do you do? And we have a team social group, and then we will go out into the community and talk about neurodiversity and autism and services to anyone and everyone who will listen. We try to do a lot of first responder training, and then really a lot of neurodiversity in the workplace training, because I think there are a lot of well-intentioned employers, but they're afraid or they don't know how to employ that person with neurodiversity and don't realize it might just be taking a little bit of a tweak to a process to be much more successful.
I love that. I'm actually speaking at the end of the month, April 30th, at an event where I'm talking about being the leader, being the boss, being the business owner, and understanding that we have so many unique qualities about all of our employees, right? But or our clients, but even knowing, okay, maybe I don't know if somebody is on the spectrum or neurodiverse. However, there are some characteristics I should watch for. How do I adjust myself as a leader to be able to accommodate some of that? Not that I'm saying we have to totally change our businesses for every individual person, but just having some knowledge about, instead of coming right at you, if you made a mistake on something, maybe the approach becomes just a little bit different. So I'm pretty excited about that.
Yes.
Conversation.
And what people don't realize until we do these trainings, or that it actually just makes you a better company to work for. A lot of our processes just aren't documented, and it's frustrating for every employee, right? And then if we're sort of prompted to systematize a process or write it down for our neurodiverse individual, you know what? Every employee will benefit from documenting that process.
Absolutely.
So it really does just make our companies better, not to mention that it solves a pain point many of the time. You know, stats out there say about 80% of those with neurodiversity are unemployed or underemployed. Yet we also have in certain companies these pain points that we can't fill certain positions.
Absolutely.
And so there are some incredible synergies there that we can do if we understand, because ignorance is not bliss.
You know, and that's so funny. I know one of the things that I did as we start to wrap up today, in the elementary sector, we would work with our students, and I talked to them about this. So it was something that they were 100% on board with, but they wanted to have some kind of part in the school. We had clubs and we had different activities for all students within the school building, but sometimes they just wouldn't fit into those activities very well. And so we did a coffee bar on Fridays on our campus, and it was a rolling cart, and they loved it, but they would roll their cart around. And of course, the teachers would help them out, but then they would sell coffee to the teachers. And then if we were having like district level meetings on our campus, they would come in and sell to the superintendent. And it really taught them how to have conversations, because I know sometimes eye contact can be a little bit hard. So we were able to teach them about, when you say good morning, try to look at someone, even if you want to look at their shoes, you know, make sure that they know you're addressing them. So we would accommodate them. But what I bring that up because that's the thing about, we could tweak ourselves so easily as business owners or as employers, small little things. And I like the idea of, when you have your procedures in place, number one, clear is kind, right? So everybody will benefit, as you said. But I also like the fact that some of our kids, I know, did so well with certain aspects, right? If I can't talk to you, but I can stir the coffee after the cream and sugar goes in or whatever, that's my area of strength. And I think that that's another thing to really get to know your employees as you're hiring them as best you can, to see where their strengths are, because sometimes it just might not be the right fit. And I know that even for teachers, you might be at this campus and it might not suit you, but you go to campus B and you're a rock star. So I think that can happen for anybody. And I think we just have to be a little open to that sometimes.
Absolutely. And then it will just come back tenfold in
Yeah.
a much better way.
Absolutely. Well, I know we could have conversations upon conversations upon conversations, and we'll have an opportunity to, again, to talk within the series. But I do encourage everyone, go to Inspire ND's website, see what they're doing. You may not be in the Houston area, the Northeast Houston area, to be able to receive their services. Their store, of course, you can always purchase. But you can kind of see what that is about, so that you can look to see if you have something similar in your own community. Or maybe you're catching this and you're thinking, wow, maybe this is my next step in that direction.
Yep.
Anybody could start a nonprofit, having the right supports, being out there. And we will get to an episode when I have you back about community involvement and how we can make a difference. But such great information. Probably a lot for parents.
Yes, I'm sorry.
But rewind, watch it again. You have access. But if somebody ever wanted to just pick your brain, would they be able to reach out to you?
Absolutely.
Okay,
Absolutely.
perfect. And your contact-
InspireND.org, and then you can find my email and all that.
Beautiful,
through there.
beautiful. Well, Jennifer, thank you so much. I
Thank you.
am so glad that you are part of this project. I'm hoping that, again, this project does exactly what we want, is that is to just give somebody a little something to help you know you're not alone.
That's right.
You're not losing your mind in all of this, because it is very difficult sometimes and very challenging, no matter what level you are
Just
on.
start small, one
Yep.
step at a time. One step
Absolutely.
at a time.
All right. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
All righty.
Welcome back, everyone. We are now here with one of my newest friends and somebody I just adore, Glenda Kroll. She and I met a while back. I was on her show, and we've just stayed connected. And as we were talking about different things and kind of moving in the direction of recording her show, which I actually was on twice, we actually started talking about this brainchild of the autism documentary and where it possibly could go. And she has such a wealth of knowledge, because she's actually sibling to two brothers who have the diagnosis of autism, and they are on different places of the spectrum. And so I'm excited for her to come on and start sharing with us, because you're going to see her quite a bit as we start to navigate through that transition from schooling into adulthood and what happens moving forward. So Glenda, welcome.
Thank you so much, Sherry. I really appreciate you bringing me on. And for me, it's really so important to be sharing my journey, because I have gone through so much in my life. And most importantly, what I have done, and I know that I'm here for a reason, and my reason is so I can share my journey, so I can help other people along in their journey. I'm at a very different road the majority of people around. So for me to shed a little bit of light, share some optimism, maybe even help them through those times where you feel like you're ready to strangle somebody too. I've been there. So yeah, so let's go for it, and let's see what we can do to, I can offer some advice and help, and I'm here to guide you along the way.
All right, sounds great. So you are in Canada, I'm here in the United States in Houston, and I know our systems could be somewhat similar, but maybe a little bit different. But your two brothers, I'm assuming, went to public schools, but talk to me a little bit about, just briefly, about their journey through schooling and how they got into that transition to start moving into their early adult years.
Thank you. So yes, I have two brothers. They are at two different levels. My brothers have a genetic disorder that's called Fragile X syndrome, and it actually turned into being much more obvious out there than I thought it was. Like, it was more popular than I thought it was. I thought nobody had this until I started doing my own research. So my world many years ago, and even as a young child, because I'm the youngest of four kids. And my brothers are at two different levels. So Michael is my eldest brother. And, at this point right now, he's 71, soon to be 72 years old. And my other brother is 65, soon to be 66 years old this year. But it's been a long journey, and it wasn't such an easy journey along, because going back, can you imagine all these years ago when people with autism were not really highly looked upon? When we would go places, how the dirty looks, the stares, the talks, the rambling that went on. It was a horrible time in life. And I felt it as a young child. But as I watched, even in the years of schooling, it happened as well. So Michael always went, because Michael is a little lower level functioning than my other brother, Stephen. And Michael, I would categorize maybe today, maybe like a 7-year-old on that type of level. And Stephen, I would categorize as maybe a 10-year-old level. So they're both children, and, they're both big kids now. But, there was a place for Michael in the world because he was at a lower level. So he went in Canada, we had special schools with people who were mentally challenged. That's what it was labeled as in those years, mentally challenged. Well, actually, at the very beginning, it was called mentally retarded. And what a horrible word, but I'm just going back to, I've been through the years of it. And in those years, that's how he was classified. And he went to a school that, really, it was kind of like a kindergarten school that continued on as kindergarten. So, the basic was maybe learning a bit of the alphabet and teaching, some of the small words and a lot of arts and crafts and things like that. But he still went to every day somewhere to go. And but Stephen had another horrible type of a challenge. And I say that because he was in a bit of a higher functioning, he was like a no man land. There wasn't any place for him to go. So they wouldn't accept him into the school that Michael was in because of his leveling was a little higher. Yet when he did go to what we call a regular public school, because I was in public school, and I'm 16 or 18 months younger than Stephen, it was the same school. So when Stephen was put into the schools like I was, and he ventured into it, it was horrendous. Never mind what I went through of feeling all that. There was no place for him, no friends, because people just made fun of him, nowhere to go because people pushed him around. Schools, the teachers didn't have the time because classes were too big. And so he sort of waffled all the way around and had no place to really be. And even though they tried taking him out and putting him into special classes, which they did, but he didn't get anywhere. It turned into being more of a babysitting situation. And what ended happening with Stephen along the way, he became more and more frustrated. And the frustration lashed out where there was, when he would come home, he would be angry. I was, I was a kid in those years, and I knew how to press people's buttons. And so when I would press the buttons, because I'm a kid and don't realize of what I'm doing to him in those years, right? He would lash out at me, and there would be, I would be the one who would get hurt and get hit and all the rest of it. And, now I think back to it and I feel horrible of what I've done to him, what I did to him in those years. But, it was trying times. My parents didn't have the ability to really work with them, but be the time, because they were running a business. There were 4 kids to feed and look after, and who had all sorts of needs, very different levels of needs. So the schooling at that point in time was really pretty bad. Going back now where I stand, I see a very different situation in Canada now. We have now more schooling, we have program, we have different things. So Michael moved into, did his programming, and that at a certain age, which we would look at as maybe grade 6 or 7, or at that point in life, instead of going on, because there wasn't any higher schooling for him, he went into a community where they had what they called the workshops. And what they did is they had different groups that they brought people in, and they got some programming that they would put people in. They got some work from outside resources, some businesses that could do very small, easy type of work. So, maybe stuffing envelopes and things to the level of the people that were. But at least at that point, he had a place to go, and he had something to keep him occupied, and people that were also were more I would say were trained and educated on the levels. So, at the beginning of time, people weren't trained and more precise in those levels because it wasn't as known as much as it is today. Today we're in a different world. We have people who have been totally educated into these fields, but it wasn't that way. So it was a harder situation. And now, so Michael went there for most of his life, and that's another story of what happened, how things manufactured into a different world for that, which turned into being part of where my world came in stronger. But Stephen did nothing for a number of years. There was nowhere to go. There wasn't any programs for him to go. He sort of became a wanderer. And
So can I ask, was that when he was still school age or once he was transitioning out of like high school age?
well, he didn't make it through high school.
Okay.
We finally found a schooling that would start working with different types of his level of trying to find skills that he could work in, something that he could progress into something, but that never actually and it manufactured into anything because he didn't have the abilities for that. So really stuck in it's kind of like lost in space. And so he had nowhere to go. And then for a number of years after, he went to a special school where they worked with people that were not as school smarts, let's say, and more skills. He didn't really fit in there either. And it wasn't until I was at that point where I started recognizing that he was going nowhere and wasn't doing anything. And as I told you, I became a little disturber in my own household and was always the kid was asking a lot of questions. And so I recognized the fact that Stephen needed a job. Stephen needed to learn how to do things, and nobody was teaching him how to do. So I set out on my own course where I started looking for jobs for Stephen, and I had found jobs. I found him a job many years ago at McDonald's, which I thought was a great idea, where he could start learning from the bottom and building. But hey, we got a situation because when somebody is, Stephen had his own problems. Well, here's the biggest obstacle was my mom. My mom was a huge obstacle because when I got Stephen an interview to go for a job and I said I would go with him for this, she went down and said, no, I don't want my son sweeping out and taking other people's garbage. I don't want my son doing that. She had put my brother into a bubble. Now I know, and it took me years to realize this until I got, my own kids and recognizing that, I know she loved my brothers more than the world could say. And she did to the best of her abilities, but she also, was overprotective. Overprotected by not wanting to teach them certain things because worrying that some things were going to hurt them. And I've heard it many times and times before when I explain to people how important it is to teach your kids things, even around the house, learning how to make a bed, learning how to do the cleaning, learning how to do these things, because it's these little things that teach you major things down the road. But she didn't want, and instead of building him, she actually brought him down, and which caused Stephen to have more anxiety, no confidence, didn't have friends, all of these things because he was just in that bubble.
You
And
know, can I ask you, because I see this a lot, as a former principal, I saw it a lot. I think it started to get better as we continue to work with our families and educate them a little bit more. But I'm a mom too, and you said it yourself. We want our kids to be, not to have to go through the things we have gone through, or we want them to, always be successful and not have to feel pain and suffering. But it really is important that we start to remember we need to push our children not over the edge, but as close to that edge as we can sometimes, no matter what their abilities are, because it is harder for them later on, because I almost feel like it's an unlearn what they know and then relearn what could be possible. And do you feel like that could have been helpful for your mom to know way back then, which I know there wasn't a lot of supports and things even within schools, so I know there weren't a lot for parents at that time as well.
there wasn't a lot. She was involved in a group that she did a lot of work in. I understand and I saw it. I was a little child that was taken to all these groups because she had no babysitter. So I was brought in, told to sit down and, and told that I wasn't allowed to move around or go venturing anywhere. So, all these people, they would come together and they would learn some things, or they would get involved in activities or arts and crafts and all different sorts of things. But like I said, because of their different levels, there always seemed to be a place for Michael to get what he needed, and learn, yet there wasn't as much for Stephen. And even though maybe in deep in her heart she knew, but for some reason she became much more overprotective of him than she was of Michael. Different personalities too. We all have to look at our children. My kids are two different types of kids. I had to learn to parent different to both my kids. So the same thing, we have to resonate when we look at our children, no matter who they are and what level they are. We still, as a parent, how you parent one child is not necessarily how you're going to parent the other child. And sometimes one child needs more discipline than the other child. Like, this is just a fact of life. And, like I said, a lot of things, like I knew in my own self, I could see how much Stephen needed more, but he wasn't getting more until I started, I was very, very fortunate at one point that I found a government program, because I never let up. I was the type that I couldn't handle him sitting around doing nothing, basically being the shadow of my mother. It drove me crazy and it angered me. So I always looked around for things, and I'd find little programs or things that he could do to sort of start to build himself. Like, the whole idea was, I could see, is his confidence and his own esteem was below zero. And of course it would be, because he wasn't doing anything with his life. Life was passing him by. And so I found this program with the government, and it turned into being a blessing. And what it was is it was like he went in and we started looking at whatever skills that he did have and finding things that he did enjoy to do. And through this, he started building up some skills. And then what they did is they found him a job and they shadowed him. So what happened is, and this job was like a whole building up. So they started from the beginning of building skills, of developing communication, because his communication skills weren't great because of what his life had transpired. As he built his confidence, they started working on resumes, and until they got him into a door of someplace. And it took a couple of times, so he did a job, it didn't do well, it didn't work for him, it wasn't a good match, and it wasn't the end of it. They didn't let him go until he got into a job, and he held that job for many years. And he was very um, proud of this job that he did. And he did it for quite a long time. I think he did it for almost about 15 years until unfortunately management changed in the company. And let me go back for a moment. Not that they actually shadowed him throughout the entire time. They shadowed him, but when there was a problem, they would come back and help out.
Mhm.
And then at a point when they were no longer, cutbacks came in and things like that, I made sure that I went in and I introduced myself so that they knew I was around. And then when problems came around, they reached out to me. So I would come in and help in any ways, or I would be coaching Stephen on the sidelines so that he could maintain, until the time came when there was a manager who came in who didn't have the energy, the decency, the compassion, the understanding of somebody with special needs. And as she looked at him, he was just, he was too much work, and he lost his job.
I keep thinking, I'm hearing patterns because our guest that was on right before you today talked about some of the same things, and she comes around in our community and does meet with different business owners and talks about the same things. So I know that's, being that he's in his almost 70, it would be typical maybe to think about that way back in the day, but we know it's still happening now. And it sounds to me like, just like she was saying, her piece of advice to people would be just always take things one step at a time. And there's a lot of trial and error. Try something, see how it works, adjust, but just not give up. So it sounds like kind of your journey has been the same, going from being that protection within schools, if there was some, and then out into early adulthood where we're trying to find ourselves anyway, right? Even the most typical person who is unique
Totally.
in their own capacity is trying to figure out how they fit into the adult world. But now we're talking about people, with more needs and more challenges that make it a little more difficult to do so. Knowing that, as we wrap up today with all of this, what would be something, if you could go back or you would want to share with the audience, that would be real helpful? You have a child, a sibling, someone that you are directly connected with that is more severe, farther along on the spectrum. You need to support them going into adulthood. What would be one thing that you would tell them?
Okay, everybody can do something. So you have to learn that one of the most important things is, instead of putting your child into the bubble, when you're in your home of all places, allow them to do as much as they can do, because the skills start right in your own home. Teach them how to vacuum, teach them how to dust, teach them how to make a bed, how to make a sandwich. Do little things. I took, and I'll show you, and we'll end with this thing. It's something that I didn't know until after I was trying to teach Stephen in another position that I had got him, that we don't even realize how little things that make such a big difference. When I had him in a job and I was teaching him, the one thing I didn't recognize, first of all, his problems was with fine motor skills, of putting a paper clip on a piece of paper.
Wow. Yeah.
Okay, he couldn't manage to put a paper clip on a piece of paper. And I was there and I went, I didn't even think of that. So imagine if you can work with your child in your home by teaching them every little skill that a home takes. And let me tell you, no matter where your child is on the spectrum, because I have my brothers on different ends of the spectrum or different points. And I have seen through the years now they're in a place where they do their own laundry, where they do their own cleaning, where they make some meals for themselves. It took until major on in years that their lives would have been so much different had they had the ability of learning some of these things at an earlier age. So when we try to protect our child, what we are doing is we're actually hurting our children.
Mhm.
The safety is the fact that you're in your own home. Teach them from where they stand now, even the little things of how to sit at a table and eat with a utensil. We take
Wow.
so much for granted.
Yeah, I love that. And it's such a simple piece of advice, but has
Right?
such a big impact.
Yeah.
Yeah. Glenda, we're going to be seeing you quite a bit here on the next episodes coming up as we start navigating through adulthood, because there are so many facets that I will admit, being in the elementary world for so many years, I didn't even think about. It didn't even cross my mind, but I know that these are real situations, and this is something that we need to share out. So I'm looking forward to continuing our conversations throughout the next episodes. And thank you. Thank you for being part of this project. Hey, Amelia, welcome back to Somewhere on the Spectrum. Happy Friday to you. We're recording at the end of the week, and I know you have had a long week there in College Station at Texas A&M, where you are a thriving student.
Yeah, it's been a week, but I've gotten through it. It's Friday, and all I got to do is wait till the next week to get through it again.
Absolutely. You're getting ready to finish up the first semester, the second semester of school,
Second
the
semester,
first
yeah.
year. And I am excited to hear how your journey has been while you've been into this first year away from home and navigating everything as a college student. So let's start by just talking a little bit about your transition. So thinking back to leaving high school, determining that you're going to come to College Station, which is about what, 2 hours from your house?
A little less than that, but yeah.
Okay, so between an hour to 2 hours to drive home, and mom's not there with you all the time, and you're in a dorm. How has that transition been?
There were a lot of components to it, to be honest. Coming from high school into college, I didn't know what to expect. My parents aren't college graduates, they didn't go to college at all. My grandparents didn't go to college either. Um, my dad was in the military at the time, and then my mom married pretty young to him. Um, so like I didn't have any expectations. I didn't know what I was supposed to do. I didn't know what it was gonna look like. Uh, like I had no idea. And so looking at the list of I think 13 colleges I applied for and got into, um, I was like, let's go with this, let's look at this logically, what's the cheapest, what's, kind of closer to home, um, what has the program I want, which is neuroscience. Um, and finally, I realized, okay, well, it's either UTD or A&M. And I was like, well, A&M is closer to home. So why not? Like, if the only difference is that one is closer to home, then I'm just going to go to A&M. And so I came in A&M having no connection to it. If you are anywhere around someone who has gone to A&M, the pride here for being at A&M is massive. Some people call it a cult school, but it like I came in here and I had no idea what to expect. Some of the challenges have been like interesting. Some of them I expected, like food. I'm a very picky eater as someone on the spectrum, and I struggle sometimes to just eat in general because my brain wants something specific, and then I'm just like, I need this specific thing, and I'm like, but I'm hungry and I should eat, and it's like specific thing, and I'm like, dude. I've been lucky enough to have safe foods like 30 seconds from me, and so like I've been managing that. Another thing that's been challenge is to manage my health in general. Um, Keeping up with my school schedule and also working out, which I don't do as much anymore. Um, like I Balancing those things has been very difficult for me. And then for the transition as well, not having mom right there definitely is difficult. My mom is my best friend, and she is a big part of my support system. And so not having her here all the time has been kind of difficult. She is here today, but just because of like an Aggie mom thing going on this weekend, which is nice. So I do get to see her every once in a while, but not super often. And so I found that it was really important for me to make friends because they became part of my support system here.
Mhm.
So especially like really not roommates, but like suite mates and people who you live around. It's good to make friends with those people because you might need something from them. You might want to go out somewhere and need someone to walk with you, stuff like that. And I think for like the transition to college, the work has been interesting. Um, it's different. I think it's harder. You actually have to pay attention in classes, which I've never had to do before. And you have to take notes a lot of the time, and which I've also never had to do before. And so it can be difficult for me to take notes because I don't really know what's important and what isn't important. And sometimes I will just start zoning out and being in my own little world. Eh, excuse me. And when that happens, I'm just like, I missed something crap, and then I gotta like write it down again. Um, as for like support and like from the school, I think college is more, it just depends where you go. A&M has a great disability service center, and I take all my tests there, and I get extra time, and it's like a small, quiet room. I'm not by myself, but like it's small and quiet, and I can focus on my stuff, and it's so super, super nice. And I use it for all my tests, but like it's just so nice just to have that. And I think that if I ever need like another accommodation or to expand one of my accommodations, I just email my disability services officer. I don't know what it's called, but there's this guy I email and I'm like, hey, like, what do you guys have? And as for options for this one accommodation, and he'll, give me the lowdown of what that is. And like recently, I needed to change my extra time from 1.5 times to 1.75 times because of history. I'm not even going to go into all that, but history, that test nearly didn't finish. And so I emailed him and I was like, hey, can I bump this up for this class? And I had to bump it up for all the classes, which was whatever. I just finished early. But it was just so smooth and easy to ask for an extra accommodation. And I really feel like the support for those on the spectrum and just disabled people in general is pretty like large on campus. There's a whole group I'm in right now that's for disabled peers, and so they have their meetings. I don't necessarily go to because I don't have the time, because I don't have the time for literally anything this semester. But it's good to know that it's there, and that if I want to go and hang out with my fellow disabled peeps, then I can go do that. Um, Making friends has been kind of hard a little bit. Other than like lab partners or people you sit next to in class, it's like you kind of have to be intentional about it. I think the best way to do that is like clubs and orgs, which as cliche as it sounds. I would definitely like recommend getting into like things you love in org. So I'd recently joined Seafood Variable, which is nerd stuff. And I found like a bunch of people who love all the same nerdy stuff I do. And I've even found a Dungeons and Dragons group that I play with every week. And so that's been good. So I think the success of my transition has mostly been due to my family and my mom, mostly my mom. She's a planner, so she like really has been super helpful on helping me figure out what I need and like in what places where I can find them, so that my transition is easier, even though she didn't go to college. She helps me figure it all out, even though we don't know what we're doing all the time.
Well, Amelia, you just said a mouthful of stuff, but I want to back up for a moment and say, number one, congratulations to you for being first generation college goer. That is a big feat, and not everybody gets on that path when that's not the norm for your family. So kudos to you and to your family, because I have to say this, I know your mom, and when she speaks about you, she lights up. and she loves you. I don't know if she's in the room with you now, if she can hear
No.
anything, but she's proud of you. She's very proud of you. And as a mom myself, it just warms my heart to hear you both say the same types of things in separate places, because you know it's genuine and you know it's real. But you bring to light a lot of important things, and throughout the series so far, I've heard a lot of families, a lot of parents say, stay connected with your child's school. And that was something that was a trend through elementary, middle school, high school. I think we even talked about that a bit. And I know as a former principal, that's what I always wanted. Let's form those relationships so we're working together as a team to determine, what's going to be the best path for each child. And it sounds like that's exactly what you're doing and advocating for yourself now at A&M. And I know it's from guidance with your mom now, but you're learning how to do that in life. And I think that that's going to be a lifelong skill that you will be able to utilize as you continue through college and into the working world. Because I definitely see you on that path of success moving forward. So kudos to you on that as well. Yeah. When you talk about challenges, one of the things that I remember now, I went to college a whole long time ago. Okay. I am old, long time ago. And my college path was interesting as well. I went to community college, not because I didn't get into a college. I was accepted at a private college with a scholarship for music.
Oh, that's nice.
But I ended up becoming a teenage mother, and it just wasn't in the cards for me. So I went community college, and then because I had a baby, I couldn't go to a typical university, right? And that made my path different. I didn't get to experience the dorm life, and I didn't get to experience having to go out and make friends necessarily, because I lived with my then husband and our daughter and worked and went to college. So my experience was different. But one thing that I did notice, and I'm so glad to hear you say, over the years, it makes me proud to know that universities are putting things into place to support people that are not on a typical path.
Yeah,
Because, yeah, that's not always been there.
completely. Yeah.
Yep. And people dropped out. And I think if we would have had different kind of supports back in the early 90s, even in the early 2000s, we would have more college graduates out in the world. I do believe
Yeah,
that.
I even see now, like now that you mention it, I even see now like signs up about if you're pregnant and like support systems, who to call, stuff like that. So it's not just disabilities, it's like everything they have support for. I think that's really A&M. I can't guarantee that for everywhere because we're not everywhere. But A&M's culture just excuse my alliteration here, but its culture cultivates a like feeling of support for one another. And so it doesn't matter like what you believe, whether you're disabled or not, um like who you are, like none of that matters because Aggies stick together and Aggies support each other. And so I really think that's an important part of being here now that I've been here for a little while. At first I wasn't so sure, but now that I've been here a little while, that's kind of the thing I realized that is going on.
And I agree with you, we hear all of the things, and I know a lot of Aggies. I absolutely, very close friends of mine. And we used to joke around too, that it was a bit of a cult, right?
It is a little bit.
Yes. However, I think you hit it when you said they take care of Aggies. Aggies take care
Yeah.
of Aggies. And I think that's what makes it a unique experience. And my hope is that there are other universities around the world that are doing
Hmm.
something similar for people, so that anybody has the access to be able to
Hmm.
make their goals and dreams a reality. I
Yeah.
definitely believe in that. Amelia, I know that college can be rough for anyone, right? Balancing the workload, and when you're working on your bachelor's degree, I always said this too, and I say this to kids leaving high school that I've worked with before, my own daughter, my own self, friends. they start to weed out the ones that can't handle that workload.
Yeah.
Because you never know what's going to happen, you know, in real life as well, when you get that first job, when you go to that
Mhm.
first level. So don't feel, I don't want to say don't feel overwhelmed, because you're going to feel overwhelmed.
A little
But the
bit.
great news is you need to feel overwhelmed, you know, but always remember, I think a great piece of advice, and this might help people out in the world as well. Don't let yourself get so overwhelmed you want to go over to the edge before you start to ask for help. You have that bond with the school, you have the bond with your family, and keeping that in mind. And for any of you out there sending your children off to universities or colleges here in the next year or so, really, I want to emphasize this because I think Amelia makes a good point. Going to college is not an easy task. And whether you need the degree or not anymore, because life has changed so much, if you're set on that path and you want to do well, stay in touch, stay connected, and don't feel less than if you have to ask for help. So I think that that's super important. So you're going to be going on summer break soon, taking any summer classes, or are you taking a break?
Yes. Physics of the summer, because I'm not taking physics at an engineering college. I'm just not doing that.
Well, I understand that. So I wish you the very best of luck. And as we start to wrap up, what is one thing that you want the world to know that has been the most amazing experience so far on your college journey?
I think you hit the nail on the head, but I'm going to reiterate advocacy for yourself and for what you need is the number one most important thing. Because if you never ask for it and you never say it, you're never going to get it.
I love it. I love it. And feeling comfortable with doing that, right?
Yeah, because I feel uncomfortable sometimes asking for it. I'm very independent. I like to do things myself. Not necessarily insecure about it. I like to do it myself. But when I do need help, eventually I'm just like, all right, I need to ask for it. Otherwise, I'm never going to get to where I need to be. And sometimes we just need to lift each other up in order to get where we need to be.
Absolutely. I think that is the perfect way to end this conversation. Thank you once again for joining me. And as I mentioned last time, I'm going to be watching you on this path because I know you're going to do some really amazing things in the world. Bye, Amelia. Thank you. Well, as I say, as we wrap up each week's show, wow, just amazing, right? So many things to be thinking about. And we mentioned it in one of the interviews today, but feel free to go back and watch this as many times as you need, especially because some of those nuggets of information can be very valuable if you are in the middle of going through certain places along the spectrum, certain places along the timeline of a life. As you know, we've divided each of the episodes into different bands, and next week we're going to be coming to you talking a little more about what happens in the adult years and jobs, and what happens if you don't want the typical 9-to-5 job. Maybe you want to be an entrepreneur. Is that even possible? We're going to find out next week, right back here on Somewhere on the Spectrum.